Alright then my friends, you're welcome to another lesson with me, Nelson Edu-Media.
Yay!
Joe, do you mind telling us what we will be doing today?
It's my pleasure, sir. You said you will be teaching us how to create shapes using HTML and CSS.
That's good. In the previous class, I introduced CSS to you guys and told you the various ways we can add CSS styles to our HTML document through the following methods. We have the inline styling, internal styling, and external styling. Today, we are going to talk about CSS shapes.
The square, rectangle, circle, and the triangle.
Yes. To create shapes with CSS, you first have to examine the desired shape you would like to replicate with CSS. For example, the square. The square has both the width and the height property. The width and height of a square are equal, and we can specify the width and height using the basic units of measurements in CSS, e.g. the pixels. We have other units in CSS that is used for measurements, but for the purpose of this lesson, we will be making use of the pixels. Try to remember your secondary school mathematics, when the mathematics teacher would ask you to calculate the area of a square with length of 50 cm, and you will be like, oh, easy peasy. Since they've given us the length and the breadth is obviously the same because a square has equal size, you will just multiply 50 by 50 and then you've gotten your answer, 2,500 centimeters squared. It's same as what we do when creating a square in CSS. To create a square in CSS, just specify a width and a height property of same pixels for your div and give the div a background color so it would be visible. Note, our div is a transparent empty container. The rectangle on our right hand side is very much like our square. The only difference is that it has a longer width and a shorter height. Let us open our text editor and try creating our square. For creating the square and other shapes that we are going to be creating, we'll be using the div tag. So remember how the div tag looks like, just div, and yeah, this is our div tag. There are several ways we can style this div as I mentioned before. We could use the inline styling method, the internal styling, and the external styling. Let's try our inline styling for this. So we would use inline style for our square and rectangle, and the internal style for our circle. Finally, we would try using external style for our triangle so that we can get a good grasp of the various methods used in styling our HTML documents. To use the inline style, input the style attributes in the opening tag of the element you intend to style. In our case, it is the div, so let's do it. Notice the two double inverted commas. It indicates the area where you can write your inline styles. All our inline styles must be written inside the double inverted commas where my cursor is blinking. Now let's go ahead and give our div a background color. The semicolon helps to separate different styles written in between our double inverted commas. Now let's give our div a height of 200 pixels. Oops, nothing showed up. Well, okay, so you see, it would not spell our background color completely. So you see, if you make a mistake in any of your code, it's not going to work. So let's complete our spelling and background color. Voila, so now we have our div, a height of 200 pixels. As you can see, our div occupied the entire screen of our system. That is because by default, the div has a 100% width. Our aim is to create a square. So let's alter the default width of 100% and make it 200 pixels as well. So it will be equal to our height. So we see we have our square already. Very simple. Let us copy this and increase the width so we can have our rectangle. So we just paste here and then we increase our width. Let's say maybe 400 pixels. Oh wow, we incidentally created a L shape. But that's not what we wanted. So let's change the background color of our rectangle to blue so we can easily differentiate between the both of them. Yeah, so we have a square at the top and a rectangle at the bottom. Congrats on creating your first shapes in CSS. Like our square, the circle has width and height property. But what makes it different from the square is these round edges. To achieve a square that is round, we have to include the border radius property. It helps us specify a radius for our square. If you just want a round corner square, you can make the border radius small, let's say 7 pixels. You see how just the edges were made round. The radius is very important in creating a well-rounded circle. The bigger your radius, the bigger your circle. Let's head over to our text editor again and experiment with the border radius property. This time around, we will be making use of the internal styling method. So, get ready. For internal styles, we have to use the style tag, and the style tag must be placed in the head section of your HTML doc. So where's the head section of our HTML doc? Now we can see this place. So this is the head section of our HTML doc and this is our body section. Now we want to place our style tag. We can just place it right below where I linked my external CSS. So we could say style. So this is our style tag. Look at your HTML doc as a robot that is divided into two parts, a head and a body. Everything that would affect the behavior of our website would be placed in the head section, while everything that will be displayed on the website would be placed in our body section. We see how numerous they could actually be. They are usually more than those in the head section.
In my head, I have other tags, but Nelson decided to show you guys only 3.
Don't be sad. Well, so we have it. Since our style tag is affecting the behavior of our HTML document, we would place it in the head section. Next, we have to call our HTML selector. It can be a tag name, a class name, or an ID. If it's a tag name, we just write the name of the HTML tag we want to style, followed by curly braces, which indicates where our styles would be placed. Remember that our circle is just like a square. The only difference is the border radius. So to create a circle, we just have to rewrite the code for our square, then give it a border radius of, let's say, 50%. So let's go ahead and do it. Before we start styling, we need to add a new div. So this div would be our circle. So we've added our new div. You see nothing appeared there because our div is transparent always and there's nothing in it. So we'll first of all call our HTML selector. In this case, our div, this is what we want to style, so we'll call it. So let's say div. Then our curly braces to contain our styles. So first of all, let's give it a background color. And I would like to give it a background color of yellow, so it should be different from the others. Then height. We'll make the height 200 pixels. Okay. Make the width to be 200 pixels. Then lastly, for us to get our circle, the border radius. So just make it 50% and that should give us a circle. Oops! All of our divs turned into a circle. What happened? Remember, our HTML selectors could either be a tag name, a class name, or an ID name. In our case, we used a tag name. and all three of our divs had the same tag name. So since a border radius property has not been specified for the two other divs, they would inherit this new radius property value being assigned to their tag name. What if that is not what we want? Obviously, that was not what we wanted to do. So, to avoid such errors in the future, we would have to make use of the class and ID selectors, which is peculiar to only the element which receives it. To specify a class name, you use the class attributes the same way we used the style attributes. So we'll go to the opening tag of our div and input the class name. Let's give our div a class name of circle. Circle, okay. After giving your div a class, nothing would change. You would have to call that class in your internal style or external style file for it to function. To select a class name, you write a dot before the class that we named. So let's remove this div now and let me show you how it is done. So our class is circle. So before writing circle, I would start with a dot, then I'll say circle. Now we'll see that only our last div with the class of circle received the styles indicated for the circle class. That's because the div must have the class in order to inherit any style given to that class. As a challenge, pause this video and see if you can give your first div a class of circle. Alright, what happened? Notice that the first div also inherited the border radius property and became a circle. Now let's quickly remove that class of circle because we don't want our div to be a circle, that first one at least, just the last one that we want to be a circle. Okay, so we have our square back. Now that we know how to create a circle, let's create our final shape for this lesson, a triangle. Unlike our square, rectangle and circle, our triangle is not straightforward at all. Though we'll be using one div, it takes a longer line of code to create a triangle, and by long, I mean maybe 7 lines or so. We'll be tapping into the border property for us to successfully create a triangle with a mass of 7 lines of code. We need to set a border for the top, right, left and bottom of our div. That is why we have 4 triangles with different colors. So if we want just one triangle to display, what we'll do is that we'll make all other sides of the triangle to be transparent. Now we have just the triangle at the bottom, but what if we want the one at the top? What are we going to do? For us to get the triangle at the top, we just make the other ones transparent and leave the one at the top to be visible. As a challenge, figure out how you can make either the left or the right triangle be the only ones visible on our screen. Pause this video and see if you can complete this challenge. Alright, if you're able to figure that out, give this video a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't. So to make either the left or right triangle to be displayed only, we make all other triangles transparent. Very easy, right?
Yes.
Well, for this particular shape, we'll be using the external styling. So let's learn how we can add our external styles to our HTML document. To add external styles, we make use of the link tag. Then we call our rel attributes. The rel attribute defines the relationship between a linked resource and the current document. When we make the value of our rel to be style sheet, it specifies a persistent or preferred style, which would always be applied when style sheets are enabled. Another value we could give to the rel attributes is the alternate style sheet. As the name implies, it defines an alternate style. This is not all that is needed to link our external style. we still haven't specified the location of our file, which in our case is style.css. But you could decide to use any other name of your choice, but remember to add the .css extension at the end of the name you give to your external CSS file. To specify the location of our file, we use the href attribute, which is a hypertext reference attribute. So the value of our href would be style.css, as that was the name of our external CSS file. Let us open our text editor and do some practical coding. This is where I linked my external CSS. But before we go to this location, our style.css, let us first of all add a new div. So we'll say div, then give it a class of triangle. Okay, so we have our div with the class of triangle now. Let's head over to where our style.css is. So this is a tab. I tap on it, and when you come, you see your style.css is empty. Unlike our HTML document that has a boilerplate, your CSS, your external CSS does not have a boilerplate. You just need to call your tag name, your HTML selectors. If it's a tag name you are using, a class name or an ID, you just need to call it and start declaring your styles. Remember, I gave our div a class of triangle, so we are going to call that triangle now in our external CSS. Please note that the way you call your class in internal style is the same way you would use to call your class in external style. There is no difference. So I would like for us to try it. So if we want to call our triangle, you know that the name is triangle, so we'll add a dot first, then we'll write triangle. Then we'll put our curly braces to indicate where our styles would be. So this is it. But we already know how to use class. So let's head over to our HTML document and change the class to an ID so that I can explain how we use IDs in HTML and CSS. So we just change here to ID. Yeah, so our triangle now is now an ID. And for us to call an ID in CSS is different from the way you call a class. For you to call an ID in CSS, you use the pound sign. That's it. So we use the pound sign, or we say the hashtag, for you to call your ID in CSS. Now we have our triangle, we've called it. Let's start declaring our styles for that triangle. Like our rectangle and our square, our triangle also has a width and a height property. But we're going to be making our width and height 1 pixels because we don't really want it to be that visible. We're trying to create that sharp edge that is at the top of our triangle. After we've specified the width and height, we'll now make use of the border property. But in this case, we will not be using border radius, as our triangle does not have round corners. Instead, it has sharp edges. Our border has a top, right, left, and bottom property. We could specify a value for either one of these aforementioned properties by simply saying
border top, border right, border left, then finally border bottom. So this is how to specify the 4 different sides of our border.
our border top and the rest of our border properties, they can hold 3 values each. The first value would be the size of the border, which in our case is 200 pixels. Next is the appearance of the border. Here you could make it appear as dotted lines by writing dotted, or as dashes by writing dashed. But if you want it to be a plain straight line, then you will put solid there. Remember to always add your spaces. In this case, we do not require dashes, but your space is very important as it helps to differentiate between the different values that you have inputted. Now, if we look at our output, we can see that this we have this tiny line here. This is our border that we have here, and the reason why it's tiny is because our width and height, they are 1 pixels. At least we have one sharp edge already, but we don't want our border color to be black. As you can see, that line is black. We want it to be red, so we'll specify a color for that, and that takes us to the last value for our border top property. So the last value is the color that we want, so we'll specify it as red. So we'll do same for the other properties for us to get our triangle. Now we'll see we have the exact image we had in our board a while ago. So how do we make just one of it to appear? I remember I've told you guys before when I was explaining it with the board. So as a challenge, make all other triangles disappear, leaving just the green triangle. Pause this video and see if you can complete this challenge. Alright, so all we have to do is to make the others transparent and we would have our triangle. But in case you tried removing all the other triangles instead, you must have noticed that our triangle lost its shape. You see, our triangle returns to that thin line that we started with. The only triangle we can remove and still maintain the shape of our triangle is the top triangle. So let's remove the top triangle and see what happens. So you see, we still have our triangle here. If we want just the bottom triangle, we still have our bottom triangle. But for us to actually have the bottom triangle, what we need to do is to make all other parts to be transparent. So let's make our yellow to be transparent. Then we'll make the blue transparent. There we have it. We have a triangle. Feel free to experiment with all the shapes we've done and head over to the description for your final challenge for this lesson. Goodbye for now.